And once again, I want to say greetings to each and every one of you, Aquaba, and welcome. Welcome to another round of culturally conscious communications here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, here on livinginblack.com. My name is Keidi, and on Fridays I am joined by your co-host, Dr. Steph. And we look at what is happening in the world. We look at culture, consciousness, historical perspectives. We deal with entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity with a special focus on show me the money. Today's date is Friday, the 13th of June, the year 2025 in the Western calendar. This corresponds to the year 6265 in the Kemetic calendar, to which we have realigned our cultural clock. Welcome to the seventh millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, and livinginblack.com. And welcome to my co-hosts. What a joy it is to be with you once again today. Dr. Steph is in the house. I hope you are in beautiful spirits today, Dr. Steph.
Yes, I am. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I feel as beautiful as you look. And I believe you are joining us from Kenya again today. Am I correct?
No. I'm in Jamaica. I am
Okay.
in the great town of Gordontown. So I've made it back to Jamaica, and
Okay.
it is absolutely one of those fabulous, perfect days.
Awesome. Gordontown, Jamaica. Nice. Now, how long were you in Kenya?
I was there for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dynamite. One of my favorite countries, Jamaica, undeniably one of my favorite countries as well. But for people who've never traveled out of the U.S., what do you have to say about Jamaica and or Kenya and the other places that you've been visiting?
Well, I think travel is so important because, again, especially when we talk about things like today's topic, where we're looking at, through a lens of what's happening in, if you say, in your particular environment, it's great when you get an opportunity to see through other lenses how the environment is being discussed, how it's being experienced, but what's happening in other regions, what other parts of the world, what is business as usual in those particular, places. I was there for business, so I stayed focused on business. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
those are the June bugs. I learned. I was asking yesterday, well, what's that noise? So the June bugs are out making a little bit of June bug noise. So
All right.
I have a little bit. I said at any moment I may have a rooster or, you know,
Mm-hmm. Coming in
all
the room to harvest the June bugs, huh?
background noise. Exactly. But anyway, what traveling allows you to do is definitely to gain perspective. And I think in gaining perspective, it's really important because when we talk about what are the options that I'm going to explore, oftentimes those options are presented by being able to have diversification. And you can only have diversification by exploring and identifying possible opportunities. So
Okay.
what I've seen is definitely, the confirmation that the continent, different countries, they're making decisions, they're executing on those decisions. There is a momentum that's being built around not only controlling resources and assets that each country has within their purview, but really looking at how trade and relationships happen with others, and so it's been a real reset, renegotiate, restructure, reconsider. Let's plan for a new future. Where we are at this point is not exactly where we necessarily, this is a kind of a global conversation, want to be. So if we want to be in a different place, then we need to make some different decisions. And I certainly see that momentum is building, is continuing here in Jamaica as well, which is, everything that I sort of identified as opportunities. I am grateful that I started and continued to move in those directions because I see that sometimes, yes, you can be the early mover. And that means that you see opportunities before they may be fully baked for others. But that puts
Hmm.
you in a position to determine what are the plays that you want to make.
Now, as we look at our situation, we're looking around. Today, we're going to kind of take a look at the state of the USA and other points. And we're going to ask the question to discuss what we can do to improve our financial outlook. Today, we cannot help but look at the United States and say, it's getting crazy around here. What do you have to say to those of us, especially those people in our listening audience who don't own a passport? What do you have to say about the state of craziness the United States is in? I mean, we could go through the list. It is getting longer, literally by the minute.
Yeah, I would say that I definitely wouldn't want to be sitting without a passport for sure. Like just let's talk about basic needs met. And I wouldn't want to be sitting without thinking about, in the event of an emergency, what does that look like? What does that mean? What is my um, family? What how do we prepare in the event that we need to make a move, go undercover, or do any of those things? What are our options, right? I was talking to a colleague of mine, and he wasn't joking, although he was kind of saying it with a laugh. He's like, look, we have a few bunkers identified, strategically placed across the US, that in the event we have to quickly get to a location, we have a few of those locations that we can show up and know that we're ready to be locked down and safely and securely secure our family. We have what we need, right? And I don't know that people have thought about those possibilities and what that looks like, although I can't validate this. It was a third party conversation, but someone was sharing that California in particular had cleared out the ammunition and the guns, that people definitely have bought all of the guns and ammunition that they could find. So they're preparing for something. There's an awareness that something is happening, potentially. So just being, in keeping those things in awareness and top of mind, what would you do? You know?
Yeah. Wow. Well, let's take a look at the state of affairs today. And from your perspective, what is the current status of living in the USA? We could look at the economics, we could look at the tax related issues, the political polarization is undeniable. And then, even in technology, technological advancements, what is AI going to force us to do? There's so many particular points that we could look at when examining the situation as it stands in the USA, and then we're looking at our status compared to the majority and empowered group.
Well, I think what it is it's about really, unpacking a few of those things, right? If we go high level and we say, well, what is the US presenting as its posture in terms of, business as usual, right? I was checking, it looks like, the S&P is near, record highs, but what is that based on, right? When you start looking at the high level sound bites, things appear to be, trugging along as planned. But then when you start peeling back the layer, peeling back the onion layers, you begin to see that not everything that's being propped up as strong growth is truly that. You know, organizations tend to play a game when they want to increase profits. So you can't just necessarily go off profits, because the thing that they do is they get rid of the payroll, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unload the employees, you know, give everybody a pink slip. Yeah, that will cut your costs. That will get some money down to the bottom line, because that reduces your operational expenses. And that's what everyone's aiming for with AI. But as with everything, new technologies still require some people involvement and some parts of those processes. But definitely anyone working in an organization that provides solutions that can be replaced through AI or through other tools, you definitely need to pay attention, because as those technologies continue to evolve, and they will improve, they will continue to evolve and they will continue to improve. Obviously, there's things like capacity that has to be the more powerful the requirement of the machines, then the more powerful capacity is required of those machines. So in some cases, there is a little bit of they can't just go full speed ahead. But this is also why Africa is in play, because many of those ingredients necessary, the cobalt, you know, the lithium, all of these different things that are powering the batteries and the compute power of the systems, those raw materials are what Africa tends to have in abundance. And so that
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of why, the major multinational organizations, especially those tech companies, are well baked in those countries, in those regions of the world. That's what's happening with controlling those commodities. So when you see people looking to, move to hedge their bet, then it's going back to, gold is important, recognizing cryptocurrencies are important, what type of commodities are being, shifted in demand, and where are they? If the US has trade wars and tariff relationships, what has that created? Has that opened up some other opportunities? And I say yes. There have been many opportunities opened up in other regions of the world. So, you know, again, first movers prepare to take advantage. But it's an
Mm-hmm.
elephant, so you can't eat it all, right? So you're going to have to strategically pick what are the pieces of this big, you know, macro economy, macro political environment. What are the pieces that I can get a handle on and pay attention to and make some strategic decisions around?
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know whether you had a chance to examine today's news in the United States. Has and Israel is, of course, attached to the United States. United States attached to Israel at the hip, and Israel has today launched the war that everyone has been predicting for several years would be coming, and that war is against Iran. Did you see that news today?
I did. I saw that news last night,
Hmm.
and I was up a little bit, like, wow.
Yeah,
Wait,
well, the stock market take a major plunge today, 1% plunge, which is major when you're talking 4,000 points or so in a day. Um, does the military strategic planning of the United States and its allies, does that fit into your overall analysis of what we should do as African people within the United States and how that might demand more access to natural resources from our stock in Africa?
well, it's definitely going to demand access to those particular minerals that contribute to not only, the and not only the what am I thinking? I'm saying the ammunition and just the defensive, the fighting, guns, tanks, just all of the military requirements. But the reality is it's closer to home than that. Is
Mm-hmm.
if the U.S. finds itself engaged in another war, who are the people that are on the first line that are called to fight in these particular wars? So, you want to think about that part as well. Is that's much more closer to home. Who are the
Mm-hmm.
enlisted men and women who are being tasked with fighting these particular wars? And these wars that we've been entering in of late are very different than the type of wars that I grew up hearing about. It was said that a war doesn't begin before there's a clear exit strategy, whereas these wars that we've seen over the last decades have been wars that seem to start, but there seemed to be no clear end or strategic exit in sight. So we
Mm.
end up in these long, drawn out conflicts, and I think it's a real sensitive time to be entering another conflict. We have
Mm-hmm.
so many points of instability
That's right.
happening, and so and so what does one do? What does one do in light of the news when you're attempting to take care of the day-to-day needs of your family, your situation? How do you move from my personal situation to really expanding that to understand in a broader context what are the macro impacts of these various decisions, and what does that mean in terms of planning about decisions for my family? Where should we live? How are we going to live? What are the resources that we need? How do we sustain ourselves? How do we sustain our families? Are there decisions that we should make? Do we have assets that we require a few steps to be able to monetize?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Do you
very,
have,
very critical.
cash on hand, or should you be converting that cash to other asset classes because
Mm-hmm.
of the risk of holding too much in any particular asset class?
Mm-hmm. Looking at different aspects of looking at the United States, I pulled up a few talking points in the background. Is there any impact of the environmental concerns, the weather patterns changing very dramatically? Is there any impact that we should be concerned about insofar as long-term development? Or does the weather patterns, do they change so slowly that that may not be a primary concern?
Well, I believe that the weather patterns are being manipulated, and part of
Mm,
why it is. So this is just my 2 cents from, again, conversations, research, and just observations, right? And with those things in mind, knowing that those possibilities definitely exist, that weather could be manipulated, and then asking the question, so what would be the benefit of manipulating the weather? Well, there are a lot of benefits of manipulating the weather because you can create different shifts, you can create different impacts. If it is that you're looking to shift populations, and weather creates devastation in a particular area, then now you've shifted that population, right?
mm-hmm,
Wanted to reclaim a particular area because you felt that it was important, defensively, to be able to have, access to, kind of control entry points and exit points, then certainly changing the landscape, um, the topography by causing, devastation, flood, fire, you name it, right? All of those things can um, create shifts. They do create shifts.
Now, do you believe that the U.S. is responsible for manipulating that weather?
Interesting. Well, I would say that um, definitely the US would have a seat at the table. The US would not be in the background
Mm-hmm.
if a decision was being made about, you know, strategically why this would be done. I mean in the US, think about this. Here's what we know. There are think tanks that study everything. How many thousands of think tanks are funded? These are what we see as the special interest. The lobbyists make sure that they have money allocated to these various special interests. And what are all of these different institutes studying? They're studying one particular thing of interest, but each of these things collectively shift or contribute to, one would say, well, the goal is to look at how to continue to advance humanity. Absolutely. At the same time, are some of the revelations information that could be used just as easily as it can be used for good? Could some of it potentially be used for harm or for
Mm-hmm.
selfish interest? Well, we know that that is a probability. Yes. Yes, there's two sides to every coin. So it's who are the parties that are making the decisions about what information we want to study, we want to advance, we want to manipulate. What is the overall game plan that is being played? If we step back and say the biggest concern is, not only a political concern, so a geopolitical concern, a environmental concern, a resource concern, right? A labor concern, a human concern, all of these different concerns. But what are the focus points within those respective concerns? And who are the ones that determine what we focus on in those studies? Well, obviously, is who's putting the institutions together, who's putting the team together, who's investing the resources in the study, because then they're putting forth the hypothesis that they're looking to explore. And if that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't include your interest or my interest, then no, it's just, they're not worried about our best interest. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily because they don't care. It's just that that's not the focal point of the study. That's not the focus point of the interest. So if it is that you and I have a concern about people that we say are part of our lineage, our, you know, extended communities, our families, and we're looking for our own sustainability, then we have to take the initiative to put in place various studies. We have to have this type of conversation where we say, wait a second, something is happening. I don't want to just have the rehash of the propaganda conversation. I don't want to get into just the social impact, the human right violation part. That's a part. That's a huge part. But we also need to look at what are some of these other parts, because how are we going to be able to respond in light of these particular, situations, realities? My conversation has been, all right, I need to make sure that we have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, and those plans need to exist in a broader context. they need to be what is our USA plan, but what are some other country plans that we need to have in place in order to allow ourselves some options and flexibilities around different decisions that are being made that we may or may not have the ability to influence. So it's just like when in business we talk about, well, the first thing that you want to do is you want to develop a SWOT analysis. What is the situation that you find yourself faced with? What are your internal strengths and weaknesses? What are the resources that you have? What are those strengths and weaknesses? And then what are the opportunities, which are external factors that you don't directly control? And what are the threats? And how do you go through and hedge against all of those particular variables? And I think
Hmm.
that oftentimes that comprehensive lens is not what's being utilized, to inform ourselves. Sometimes you get caught on the soundbite. I was just saying that that's the part that's so frustrating when you tune into, the US news cycle. It's repetitive. It's the same message over and over again beyond expanding the conversation to include some additional input, some additional, but that's not the desire. So then you have to go back and say, well, what is it? Let's read, but as my mom used to tell me, read between the lines. Look at what's being said, pay attention to what's not being said, pay attention to who's saying, what's in it for them, what is the benefit, and always follow the money.
Mm. Yeah.
War is
Always follow
money.
the money. Hmm.
War is about money. So what money, whose money are we moving?
Yeah. Now, as we look at what is happening inside the United States, we do know that Donald Trump's policy to remove the illegals from inside the U.S. economy and U.S. population is proceeding, yet it is causing absolute chaos as it proceeds. And he apparently the Trump regime is unrelenting. It's going to go forward despite the injury it causes to nearly every system within the United States. Does is Donald Trump and his colleagues, are they so isolated from the rest of us that they cannot even determine how this is impacting the rest of us? Or is this a bigger
I,
sacrifice?
I don't think that that's the question. Yes, they're executing their plan belief based upon their belief. But I think the question that should be asked is a different question. I have no ability to know about their thoughts, their isolation. I'm not in their camp, right? So all I could do is speculate at the best. I'm throwing blind darts if
Hmm.
I attempt to take on that question. That's not the question that I can come up with a good answer for because I only have the information that is made available from the administration, right? I have the same information that you see when he's, passing some legislation or taking action or enacting or using an executive order. Those are the same pieces of information that I receive that I see, as it's happening. The different question, I think, is being on the ground in these communities and recognizing that these things are happening. Yes, you see the protests, and the protests are great to, make people aware that we're not in agreement with this. But what else should we do? What else can we do? How can we, are there other additional things that can be done? There are farms that are going to be at risk, that are at risk losing resources. Are those resources impacting local communities? Are there ways to mobilize communities to be able to solve a problem as it relates to farming? Are we prepared for those opportunities? Are there independent farmers wanting to get access to crops that otherwise would be lost, that can then be mobilized and, you know, repurposed into some type of, supply chain that allows those crops to now get to food deserts and feed people?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's about these, because I can't stop his policies. I can't stop his engine from going. So that piece is done. We say, well, that money's gone. So what else? What else is still the reality? And where is there an opportunity potentially? And what does that begin to look like?
Mm. The cost of food, the cost of living in the United States is skyrocketing. It is going up every month. And no doubt that the impact of farm labor, which has been cheapened over the years because of the illegal immigration, no doubt about that. And that illegal immigration has essentially chased most African Americans out of the farm labor industries. And as a consequence
When
of
were we
losing,
last in the farm labor industry? We
it's
weren't
hard for
ever
you. It's
equitably in the farm labor industry. We were in the farm labor industry only when our labor was for free.
Well, that no. Let's be clear. The farm labor industry depended on black labor up until the late 50s. And that was really, really clear. Since the late 50s, it's been a steady shift. And we can see with every, and I don't have the exact statistics, but with every percentage of undocumented people living in the United States, the black participation in the farm labor industries did decline. In fact, I can even recall in the early 60s, the labor industry in the United States. Now, I agree, we should have gotten out of being stuck in that labor class. We should have had a deliberate plan to get out of it, but we didn't do that. And then we see the migrant orange pickers in Florida, et cetera, that were in place in the early 60s or so. They were chased out by the end of the 60s and the 70s. We were gone from those industries. I wish, if I could do it all over again, we had planned to exit that low labor industry and get into other classes of labor, but we didn't have a plan. 50 hindsight is 50, or hindsight is
No,
100%.
no, no. Okay, yes, but no. Keidi, I'm here in Jamaica. Who am I here working with? Farmers. Why am I here working with farmers? Because I see farmers that have farms that are at the beginning, the low end cycle, where they are labor intensive. They're not able to participate further upstream. Why? Because they're typically, not all of the farms are mechanized, so they don't have access to the equipment to increase their harvest and production. But there's not a clear business plan. So I've come and started working on creating a clear business plan by creating a clear market opportunity. I've identified a customer that's a big enough customer for these small farmers. And so I'm helping them with, one, mechanizing their farms, but more importantly, creating some of the upstream opportunities so that you are not just farming, you're creating a sustainable business that has an opportunity to not just deal with its raw materials, but begin to create something from those raw materials, create the products, create the consumables. So I
Hmm.
guess what I'm saying is yes, it looking back, yes, historically, yes, but that's That's not going to do anything right here, right now.
That's right.
Right here, right now is about doing right here, right now.
And
And
you
that's
did say
my thing
the key word you said is you are creating a plan. What
right
I am
now.
saying is
I've
that
already
African
created
Americans
it.
had no
I'm here
plan.
executing. I'm here executing because the plan I
Mm-hmm.
created, I already created it. Then I needed to come here to start executing on that plan. Someone
Mm-hmm.
jokingly mentioned to me in a conversation, and I have no clue, who they were referring to, but they're saying, yeah, somebody we were talking, and we think you're crazy. I'm like, you think I'm crazy? Because I see a business opportunity that I have the expertise to help facilitate and be a part of. So you thought Steve Jobs was crazy for seeing an opportunity to create Apple? It's so that's just the level of the ignorance
Mm-hmm.
it's like we don't understand business. That if you don't understand business, that's why you're always going to be at the tail end of business, because it's all a business. Where are
Mm-hmm.
you playing in the business cycle? And if you don't recognize what it looks like to be in the beginning, creating what's obvious business, it's like, to me, I'm going, the, these are so rudimentary to how ecosystems are developed. How
Mm-hmm.
is it that you can't in your brain connect that either you are producing something for someone else to sell, or you are producing something for yourself to be able to sell? You either are a creator of something or you are a consumer of somebody else's something.
That is right. So African Americans have defaulted to the consumption position. Looking at the numbers for the African American economy, it is about, at this particular point, 3.06 million Black owned businesses in the USA. And I calculated this about 2 years ago. They collectively produce less than $225 billion worth of economy. Yet annually, this group, African Americans, consumes right now, it's exceeded 18, no, 1.8, not 18, $1.8 trillion a year. Essentially, that puts consumption versus production at about $9 to 1. How can we ever recover from that without a decades long plan?
You need
And
more
you
than a decades long plan. I mean, the plans that I created, in fact, the plans that I'm offering are 100-year plans, 100-year sustainable plans. Because what I looked at is I started studying when I was about 18 or 19 years old. I was curious about what it took to create a business that lasted 100 years, realizing that the original founders have transitioned on. And so if that business continued under leadership or structure, what were the key ingredients to allow that venture to continue to. So I aimed, that was my working, hypothesis along the journey through business, is what are the examples of sustainable organizations? What do they look like from the inside out, so that I could replicate those ingredients in other organizations? And so, yeah, this play that I'm executing on has been a long play. It's been, I say, it's China over here, right? Just as China,
mm-hmm.
I watch China, I watch countries that emerged from nothing, watch businesses that came from nothing, watch businesses that existed and remained, viable even after having to pivot, even recognizing that the leadership succession plan has changed many times over, yet those organizations continue to be sustainable and continue to move forward. So, what does that look like? Well, if you're not focused on that type of exploration, if you're not looking at the signs of what that looks like, then no, you're not going to ever understand or consume that. You're not going to get it if you're not paying attention to it. If you're not measuring it to if you're not measuring and evaluating, you're not learning the lessons of it. So the flip side being, yes, if you're a consumer and that's what you know how to do, then the evaluation is what happens with that consumption.
Mm-hmm. All right. We would love to hear from you, our listening audience today. You can join the conversation on our Rumble page. We look for your commentary in the chat box. Do join us. Let us know where you're listening from. We invite you all to be a part of the solution as opposed to just continuing to be a part of momentum or as usual or continue on the same line that we have been on for so long. That's impossible. There's no way in the world this situation is going to change if people just continue as usual. I fear, Dr. Steph, that more and more of us that are conscious and aware are going to just at a certain point plan on getting out. And that's going to result in leaving the majority of people behind to their own fate.
I think that's already happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's already happening. Is that um, I deal with a group of global entrepreneurs who seem to really be of the mindset that as they have expanded, it's sort of like the book Who Moved My Cheese. The cheese is moved,
Mm-hmm.
and the cheese is continuing to move. And just because you attempted something, I was thinking back. I had a colleague many years back, 30 years ago, was early on working to create opportunities with different relationships in Africa, and some of those relationships, a lot of work, not necessarily all of the manifestation of things that were desired at that time. Just because you execute a business plan at a particular time and it doesn't necessarily get traction, doesn't always mean that it's a bad business plan. It just means that there are not enough variables that are in alignment for that plan to prevail at that time. Sometimes you have to go back and revisit a plan and then tweak it for the market opportunity. And that was one of the things that I made sure. That was what made me immediately make the decision to pivot into my wellness resorts and into this whole sustainable business model when I did. Is I was looking at the variables and I said, oh my goodness, we have enough things that all support this particular effort. The business model was already viable. There have been wellness resorts. I've gone back 50 plus years
Mm-hmm.
studying wellness resorts and where they were and their various treatment protocols and their outcomes and all of those things. So yeah, I knew that there was a viable business model in that.
Mm-hmm.
However, what I was creating, right, my new iteration of and where and why and who the market focus would be, you know, and realizing, I remember having to clarify for someone saying to me, well, um, they were giving me feedback about what they thought, who they thought were the customers for my business. And I had to correct them and say, no, I'm not, this business is not focused on, who you've identified. Those people don't invest in wellness. There, I wouldn't build a wellness business for people that don't spend their money on wellness.
Mm.
That's the first way to fail. No, I created a business for people that already spend their money on wellness. That, the $8.2 trillion, that folk, those folk. If you're not in those folks, no, sorry, I didn't create it for you.
That's right. And looking at the global wellness environment, I did do a report, and it's about a year or so old, but the numbers are still pretty much intact. That between today and 2028, the global wellness economy is anticipated to grow by about 2.5, no, $2.9 trillion over the course of the next 3 years.
Yes,
Inside of that tremendous, tremendous growth, Africans are going to make their stake. They're going to put in their stake, just as Chinese people are investing in it, Indians are investing in it,
exactly.
certainly Europeans are investing in it. The whole world is investing in this new wellness global market because it's expanding above the rate of inflation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
And so
African
that's
people
why,
are investing in it too.
and guess what? And so to have that and to be on the ground and realize that not only are they investing, but in their connection, they see Jamaica as a key relationship. The wealthy, throughout the continent, and there are wealthy, very wealthy families that have resources and the opportunities. They're looking for additional opportunities within their countries, and also to be able to travel to and connect with Jamaica and the Caribbean. And so, yes, I find myself really clear that the plans and the timing and the momentum and all of those other factors are now finally the right things. And had I not made the pivot when I did, back in 2020 when I was in law school, and I said, wait a minute, I want to get in position. I'm going to build out the infrastructure as much as I can, because I also wasn't gonna. I wanted to finish law school, but I'm gonna build out my infrastructure so that when I finish, I'll be ready to execute on my business plans, because I see that there's momentum in this particular direction, and so I see that, and that has been validated, and it continues to be validated.
That's right. We do welcome you, our listening audience, to join us today. Where I do see Shabaka is in the house. He said, would you please link your YouTube? I am unable to find it there or tune in. Rumble is ramble for me. So yeah, I did put up that link and he said, thank you for that. But I will let you know, Shabaka, that unfortunately, many of our cutting edge health programs will not appear on our YouTube page because, as far as I know, YouTube is still banning people and demonetizing people for putting up health related information. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So if you do not see us on a regular daily broadcast, you will come back to the Ramble channel and you will be able to get us here. Dr. Steph, you also are available on YouTube. Is your page active these days?
It's an interesting thing, because usually when it's a topic that has to do with, as you said, health, suddenly I've violated the community. So
Mm, mm-hmm.
it's like, what happened? What could I'm scratching my head going, what could I have possibly said that violated the community? As much misinformation and everything else that I see. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, there's definitely certain things that are censored from different platforms. And,
Mm-hmm.
and this again is why the importance of looking for information beyond, as they say, your usual suspects, your usual
Mm-hmm.
source, is so important. It's so important to not only travel, but also to tap into sources outside of the US, so that you can begin to see how are other news publications discussing or describing through their lens what they see happening in the US. What is their commentary? What are they talking about on their business publications? What are they talking about in terms of their social and opinions, their political stances? What are they saying? And that begins to give you some additional thoughts, maybe some additional talking points that you hadn't
Mm-hmm.
considered.
Yeah, we do have a long way to go. We got about 10 more minutes for today's broadcast. We, as a people, we have a long way to go. Ultimately, Doc, I think you know my position. I am going to follow you and I'm going to get out. And I want to get out permanently. If nothing else, get out for 6 months of the year, come back for 6 months of the year, make some money, and then get out for a longer period of time. I have been designing, and you can see behind me, you see the AI renderings for the Kujichagulia Village's strategic plan. I have now been invited to Ghana to talk to them about the Kujichagulia villages, and I'm very, very excited about that. What about the idea that we as African people could plan for, extensively plan for taking our wealth and investing it in a new location and building our future?
I think that that would be a great conversation. I think that that's going to happen though on a micro level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you're taking the position, as what people used to say to me when I own an advertising agency, oh, well, the Black American consumer market is what, and, one of the things that I always would have to say is that we're not one homogenous market.
Mm.
Though you're defining us as such, we're not. We don't even have enough consistent wherewithal to go into communities and set up our own business center. If we did, then there would be a strong Black marketplace in every city across the USA. Every place the different Asian communities go and set up business, because the first thing that they do is they set up a business center.
Mm-hmm.
They set up a community business center, an ecosystem. It is that similar methodology that I am using to build community here in Jamaica. I'm going to one community at a time and building a sustainable ecosystem, and then going to the next community to build a sustainable ecosystem, hoping that collectively then these ecosystems will begin to be strong and support each other and continue to allow that expansion to then multiply. My bet is 1 plus 1 won't end up with 2, but will end up, with 10, 20, like each time exponentially. The growth will be magnified. And I've done that by going in and understanding what are the strengths and weaknesses, what are the opportunities in this particular community. I have 5 projects that I'm working on. I think 4 right here in Gordontown that I've identified, for example, that are key foundational opportunities in this particular community. One of the things is a social impact initiative to provide access for seniors and for young people access to technology. Well, the average person would say, well, that's just creating a nonprofit. No, I'm not creating a nonprofit. I'm creating a sustainable operation that has a business case to exist. If it has a
Mm-hmm.
business case to exist, then it's sustainable. It's not subject to the whims of a granting organization.
That's
It
right.
creates its own stability in how it is I have designed it. So I design it to be sustainable from the beginning
Mm-hmm.
so that it's sustainable. And then I have
Absolutely.
2, 3 more communities right now that I'm working on. So I have about 3 or 4 different communities that I'm working on. But to your point, if our folks were looking for those opportunities, I think I know I put up a GoFundMe, I no our if the people who are supposedly your peers, if their feeble brains can only have a conversation to the effect of, oh, this person must be crazy. It's like, why am I crazy when I'm building business opportunity? And
Hmm.
then that means that and these are the so-called educated, these are your so-called educated folks who are out talking about they're training people and helping people understand business. So how can you train and help anybody understand business, and you would even make that kind of you can possibly understand business?
That's right. So we're going to be making changes, and we're going to do the best of our to the best of our abilities, one step at a time. What are the various steps you have in mind that people should be taking along this pathway? Now we are looking ahead. We've decided the past and the present route that we are on does not work. So therefore, we're making changes. What's Dr. Steph recommend that we start to do to make these changes?
All right. So you said you're headed to Ghana. You want to look at creating your village. So what is the land that you have available? How
Yeah,
much
we
is
do.
the
Yeah,
condition of that
we do have land in Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda.
land? Okay. Let's pick one. It doesn't matter. What is the condition of that land? What type of infrastructure is necessary? How many properties are you looking to create initially in that village? Who are the first takers? What is the cost to produce? If you're starting a village and you want to create 10 homes, who's your first 10 takers? What are they
Hmm.
able to commit towards the pre-development, so that you can investigate, you can understand the cost necessary to put together a development plan. A development plan requires the plan. You create the plan before you execute on the plan. You must have the plan before you can get the resources to execute the plan. No one gives you funding on a conceptual, a picture. You must have detailed numbers that define what the costs are and how these costs are going to be covered. And can you produce and execute and receive a return? If each person is say 10 of us are investing in our own property, great. What is the size of the acreage of land that I'm buying? What is the price of that? Or is it part of a shared community? Are we doing a shared area? We have 5 acres. We're going to be in that same 5 acres. We're going to build 10 houses within that 5 acres, and we need infrastructure so that we can have utilities. We need access to water. We need access to power. We need access to be able to deal with our waste. We need access to be able to deal with, are we living off the land? Are these existing farms? Do we have to plant the farms? That's what a plan tells. What's the planning cycle? How are you going to begin to plan to harvest the land? What is the schedule? What do you need? What is the equipment? What are the construction materials that you need? When are you getting those materials? Who's on the ground? Who's in charge of ensuring that if you have materials that you're bringing in, what is the plan? A plan is a very specific, detailed, you know, action of, these are the steps that I'm taking. At each step, these are the cost. This is where I'm getting the resources from. If nothing else, Keidi, as in the time that you and I have been having this conversation, how much money have you collected in a fund to even go on a trade mission? How much do you have?
Well, I'm not going to disclose those things here.
Sure, but I'm just, that to me is where it begins.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. Hmm. Well, we'll do the best we can with what we've got. And part of that is always get more. and do even better. We're going to take a few more minutes before we have to run out today. I have to get out of the office, but other points that you would put on the table besides detail the plan?
Well, I mean, I would just say that, when we look at where people want to consider is looking at diversification. If you have assets, think about how do you access. Oh, there's my nice rooster. How do you get to
Uh-huh.
those assets? If you have real estate and you have tons of equity tied up in your real estate, how would you unlock that equity if you needed to? Real estate, typically, you need to access it one of two ways. Either you need to borrow against it to pull out that equity, or you need to sell it in order to get access to that equity. Either of those things require the decisions of other people, right? So you may have a desire, but other people may not be able to either approve you or to have that. So you want to have, what else do I have available? What other tools do I have that allow me access to liquidity? When is it that I should be looking to understand those things? You should have been looking yesterday. So if you didn't do it yesterday, today is the perfect day to begin. What
Awesome.
what do you have, and how can
Mm-hmm.
you get access to it if you need to deploy it in some other ways? And you want to start looking at hedging your bets by diversifying your assets.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say.
Awesome. 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 And insofar as collaboration, what are your thoughts on collaboration, cooperation with other organizations?
I'm a big proponent for collaboration because none of us can do. We're not an island, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe in building collective ecosystems. I think people though need to be honest about that intention and move past their, in some cases, personal egos and limitations, because that is the barrier to progress.
Mm.
Is when it comes down to anything, is it's ignorance, frankly. And the things that you're ignorant of, are things that you haven't studied or invested in. But just because you haven't doesn't mean that somebody else has not invested in those particular things. So, let your ego allow you to step back.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is not about pushing yourself to the front of the line. If you don't have the solution, fall in line. Follow somebody that has a plan, and hopefully you will begin to learn how to develop a plan.
That's right. No doubt, no doubt. I can see that the rooster obviously wants your attention over there, and so we're gonna have to let it go for today. People do need to know how to maintain contact with you, Dr. Steph. How can they best reach you?
I'd say connect with me on LinkedIn. It's
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Stephanie Ardrey on LinkedIn, and then that way I can put you in the business connection and then direct you to whichever organization is most appropriate.
Okay, linkedin.com.
Yes,
Gotcha.
yes.
Okay. Final thoughts you want to share with us before we wrap it up for today?
I just want to, encourage people that, guess what? There's two sides to every coin. So as we're dealing with, disruption on one side, the other side of the coin are opportunities. Many organizations, civilizations find themselves in with opportunities as the flip side of destruction and devastation. So you might be wiped out on one side, but as long as you can look at, well, what still remains, and figure out, well, I can take this and I can build with this, or I can, plan to do X, then begin to make those plans.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you as usual. Every 2 weeks, you'll be with us again on the fourth Friday of the month. We will be joined by you, Dr. Steph, as we take a look at where is the money. Show me the money. And hopefully, our listening audience will grow by then, and people will start to not only find that money, but know what to do with it when they do get their hands on it, Dr. Steph. Thank you so much for participating.
Oh, thank you, Keidi. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. And, LIB radio family, big up to you.
Enough
you know,
respect.
yes, much respect. All right.
Awesome. Okay. We're going to wrap it up for today. I want to thank Dr. Steph for being generous with her time. 2 times a month, she is with us. And she always brings us the passionate conversations that we really do need to be engaging in. And we need to take a look at ourselves and ask the question, are we really doing it in context, or are we just fronting, if nothing else? We want to do the best we can with what we got. I do have a number of books that you can look at and read. Especially, I want people to start focusing on the Kujichagulia Villages book. That book is inexpensive. It's only $10. You can get that book at http, get the book at http // keidi.biz / CRP 2012. I highly, highly recommend you get that book, because I think the book has got the information in it that's going to help us to change and transform our reality so that we are more competitive, more autonomous, more independent, that we are more sustainable. It is a great future that we have ahead of us. We have been enjoying a great past, and we should be celebrating that great past to the best of our abilities. We should all have stake in what the future holds for all of us. And that's why you tune into your favorite. You tune into your favorite is LIV Radio, LIV TV, and livinginblack.com. So on that note, it's been a good week here at LIV Radio. We've done a lot, but we still have a long way to go. Tomorrow is going to be Saturday morning. You have to zoom in, join us on our Zoom link, and that is the Living Superfood Family Reunion. I want you to join us. You can sign up, and I'll post up that link in the YouTube. I'll post it up on Rumble in the space below. But I want you to join us, and I will answer your questions about how you can remain just as healthy as you possibly can. Or your favorite. We aim to be your favorite. We are LIV Radio. We are LIV TV, and we are livinginblack.com. So tell your friends to tell their friends that we have our own now, and we can be very, very proud of who we are, what we have, and what we are prepared to do with it. Peace and prosperity.